It was just for emergencies, Dad. Daniel said it the way people say it's nothing, when it's very clearly something. We were standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday evening. I had just printed my monthly credit card statement, the pages still warm from the printer. He stood across from me with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly raised, defensive before I'd even spoken. I was 73 years old. I had used the same credit card for 26 years. Groceries, gas, utilities, the occasional dinner out with Margaret before she passed. My spending had rhythm, it had discipline, it had history. And then it had changed. The first charge I noticed was small. $214 at an electronics store I'd never visited. I assumed it was fraud. I called the card company. "Sir," the representative said, after reviewing the account, the purchase was authenticated using the secondary cardholder. Secondary cardholder. That was Daniel. I had added him 2 years earlier for convenience, in case I was hospitalized, in case I needed someone to pick up prescriptions, in case something unexpected happened. Convenience is often the door that carelessness walks through. I hung up the phone and called him. "Oh, that," he said lightly. "Melissa's laptop died. It was urgent." "Why didn't you ask?" "It was an emergency." Emergency. That word carries moral permission. I told myself it was fine. Families help each other. The second charge was $389, sporting goods. The third was $612, a weekend hotel reservation 2 counties away. I didn't say anything at first. I waited for him to mention it. He didn't. By the end of the month, the balance was $3,487 higher than usual. That wasn't rhythm. That was drift. I invited Daniel over the following Sunday afternoon. He sat across from me at the dining table while I placed the printed statements between us. "What's this?" he asked. "You tell me." He glanced at the pages and leaned back. "It was just for emergencies, Dad." I tapped the sporting goods charge. "What emergency requires a fishing kayak?" He exhaled sharply. "It was on sale." "That's not an emergency. You don't even use that card much." "That's not the point." He ran a hand through his hair. "I thought you wouldn't mind." "Why?" "Because you have savings, because you're comfortable, because we're family." There it was. Comfort mistaken for access. I folded my hands calmly. "When you use my credit card without asking," I said, "it's not about the amount, it's about consent. You added me to it. For medical pickups, for groceries if I couldn't drive, not for weekend hotels." His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "No," I said quietly, "I'm reading." He stood up. "So what now? You're going to cancel it?" "I'm going to understand it." He left irritated. I didn't cancel the card. Not yet. I waited. The next month, the charges continued. $1,204 at a furniture outlet. $487 at a steakhouse. $2,119 for something labeled consulting services. Consulting. I had worked in auditing long enough to know vague descriptions hide specific realities. When the statement arrived, the total balance had crossed $9,000. That wasn't emergency spending. That was lifestyle supplementation. I drove to First County Bank. Sandra Whittaker had managed my accounts for years. She knew my habits, my patterns, my thresholds. "Tom," she said as I entered her office, "what's going on?" I placed the statements on her desk. "My son says these are emergencies." She scanned the pages. "Were they authorized?" "Not explicitly." Did you dispute them? No. She looked up at me. Why not? Because I wanted to see if it would stop. And it didn't. She leaned back thoughtfully. You added him as a secondary cardholder. Yes. That gives him legal usage authority. Authority isn't ownership, I said. No, she agreed. But it complicates fraud classification. What does that mean? It means this isn't fraud in the criminal sense. It's misuse within permission. Permission without boundaries invites assumption. She folded her hands. You can remove him immediately. I will. Before you do, she added, you may want documentation, in case there's resistance. I nodded. Documentation doesn't argue, it stabilizes. When I got home, Daniel was already in the driveway. Melissa stood beside him. He must have called her. You went to the bank, he said as I stepped out of my car. Yes. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. It's $9,000. You won't even feel it. That's not the point. Melissa stepped forward. We've been under pressure, Tom. The business isn't doing well. We needed flexibility. Flexibility requires agreement. You're our father. I'm not your credit line. Silence settled between us. If you've ever watched a parent realize their child sees them as a resource instead of a person, you know that's silence. And if you're listening right now and this feels familiar, pause for a second. Stories like this aren't about numbers. They're about boundaries. If this resonates with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. These stories matter because they happen quietly, behind closed doors, and sometimes the only witness is paper. Now let me tell you what happened next. Daniel crossed his arms. You think I'm stealing from you. I think you're rationalizing. I was going to pay it back. When? Soon. Define soon. He didn't answer. Melissa looked frustrated. You're being rigid. I'm being consistent. The next statement arrived 3 weeks later. The balance had climbed to $14,612. New charges included airfare, 2 concert tickets, a luxury electronics purchase. I circled each one with a red pen. Then I called the credit card company again. Sir, the representative said, these transactions were made by the authorized secondary cardholder. If you wish to remove that access, we can process it immediately. Process it? Are you certain? Yes. There was a pause. Access revoked. 3 words. Simple. Quiet. Powerful. I received an email confirmation seconds later. Daniel called that evening. You canceled my access. Yes. You embarrassed me. No, I said calmly. You embarrassed yourself. It was temporary. You keep saying that. It was never meant to hurt you. It wasn't meant to respect me either. He hung up. Melissa texted shortly after. This is tearing the family apart. No. Misuse of access tears families apart. Accountability reveals it. The next morning, I reviewed my brokerage statements. My savings were intact. My retirement income steady. My credit score untouched. Financially, I was fine. Relationally, something had fractured. Over the next week, I heard through my sister that Daniel had told relatives I was becoming paranoid about money. That I was fixated on minor charges. That I was slowing down mentally. There it was. When access disappears, narrative begins. I didn't argue publicly. I didn't defend myself at family dinners. I let the statements speak, but someone else was listening more closely than Daniel realized. Emily. She was 16, and she understood numbers better than excuses. She noticed her parents whispering about Grandpa's overreaction. She saw the tension when my name came up. And one afternoon, she asked her father a question he wasn't prepared for. How much did you charge? That question would change everything. Because once numbers enter the conversation, emotion loses control. And Daniel had underestimated who was watching. Emily didn't ask gently. She asked directly, how much did you charge on Grandpa's card? It was a Tuesday night. I wasn't there, but Daniel told me later how it happened. Melissa was loading the dishwasher. Emily was standing at the kitchen island with her algebra homework open. It wasn't that much, Daniel said. That's not a number. It was temporary. That's not a number either. Teenagers are allergic to vagueness. How much? She repeated. He hesitated. About 15,000. Emily blinked. That's not an emergency. It wasn't all at once. That makes it worse. Silence followed. Did Grandpa say you could? She asked. He added me to the card. That's not what I asked. No answer. That silence was the first crack. The next afternoon, she showed up at my house unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Hi, Grandpa. Hi, kid. Can I ask you something? Of course. We sat at the dining table, the same one where Daniel had once explained emergencies. How much did Dad charge? $14,612.39, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. That exact. I keep records. She looked down at her hands. He said 15. He rounded. That's not rounding, that's avoiding. She was sharper than I had realized. Why didn't you tell everyone? She asked. I don't argue narratives. I correct facts. She nodded slowly. Can I see the statements? I hesitated for half a second. Not because I doubted her. Because numbers carry weight. Then I retrieved the folder. She flipped through the pages carefully. Concert tickets. Electronics. Airfare. Furniture. Her jaw tightened. He told Aunt Linda it was groceries and gas. It was. She exhaled slowly. He said you were getting obsessed with money. I'm consistent with money. There's a difference. She photographed the pages quietly. You don't mind? No. Truth doesn't need secrecy. That evening, she confronted him again. You lied, she said. I didn't lie. You minimized. That's not the same thing. It kind of is. Daniel tried to explain. Tried to frame it as temporary relief. Tried to describe the business pressure, the bills, the stress. Emily listened. Then she said something simple. If you needed help, you should have asked. Children understand that better than adults. Over the next week, relatives began calling me. Not cautiously. Directly. Tom, my brother said. Emily showed us the statements. I see. Daniel said it was under 5,000. It was. He said you were confused about the charges. I'm not. Silence on the other end. Are you okay? He asked. I'm 73, I replied, not incompetent. He exhaled. I'm sorry we believed him. Belief travels faster than correction. But correction lasts longer. Sandra called me on Friday. I heard there's been family discussion, she said carefully. There has. I wanted to confirm something for you. Your account remains in excellent standing. No irregular activity beyond the authorized secondary charges. Thank you. And your credit score hasn't moved. Good. Mr. Bennett, she added, this situation is common. Family members conflate access with entitlement. That's a dangerous confusion. Yes, it is. That weekend, Daniel came over again. This time, he didn't defend himself. He sat down heavily. Emily showed everyone, he said. Yes. She shouldn't have done that. She shouldn't have needed to. He looked tired. I messed up. Yes. I thought if I framed it as small, it would feel manageable. Manageable for who? For you. No, I said quietly, for you. He rubbed his face. The business was collapsing. We were drowning. And you reached for the closest rope. He nodded. I was going to pay it back. When? After the next contract closed. And if it did? He didn't answer. Daniel, I said evenly, if you had come to me and said, I'm in trouble, I would have listened. I know. But you didn't. I didn't want to look weak. So you made me look unstable. That landed. I told people you were paranoid, he admitted. I heard. I told them you were slowing down. I heard that too. Silence. The hardest truth is not financial. It's relational. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally. Start with numbers. What? Repayment. He blinked. I don't have $14,000. You don't need it today. I can do $500 a month. That will take almost 3 years. I know. Years are not frightening when discipline exists. I'll consider it, I said. And I'll tell everyone the truth. Not just that you exaggerated, that you misused it. He swallowed. I will. Over the next month, he made the first payment. $750. Labeled clearly, repayment. Documentation matters. I didn't praise him. I recorded it. Melissa came over alone the following week. I pushed him, she said without preface. For what? For the card, for the charges. I told him you wouldn't notice. I noticed. I know. She looked ashamed. We were embarrassed. The business was failing. We didn't want anyone thinking we couldn't manage. So you let them think I couldn't. She nodded. That was wrong. Yes. I'm sorry. Specific apologies carry weight. I accept that, I said. Forgiveness is not surrender. It is boundary plus grace. Emily continued visiting on Sundays. We drank tea. We talked about school. One afternoon she asked, Are you mad? No. You don't look mad. I'm not. What are you? Careful. Carefulness keeps relationships from collapsing entirely. By late autumn, Daniel had repaid $3,500. Small. Consistent. Each deposit documented. At Thanksgiving dinner, when someone mentioned financial stress, Daniel spoke up before I could. Dad handles his money better than any of us, he said. It wasn't dramatic, but it was public, and that mattered. After dinner, Emily pulled me aside. Are you going to forgive him? I already have. Then why does he still look scared? Because forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. She nodded thoughtfully, and I realized something. The credit card charges had been about money. But the repair would be about character. And character rebuilds slower than balances. Daniel still had a long way to go. Because repayment fixes numbers. Humility fixes relationships. And he wasn't there yet. Not fully. But he was closer than he had been. And sometimes, closer is enough to begin. By December, the balance on the card had returned to normal. Not because the charges were forgiven. Because the access was gone. That distinction mattered. Daniel continued sending repayment transfers twice a month, sometimes 500, sometimes 750, once a full 1,000. Each time, he texted a screenshot. Repayment, December. Repayment, bonus. Sold equipment, applied. No emojis, no defensiveness, just acknowledgement. I updated my ledger. Numbers don't hold resentment. They only measure movement. The narrative outside the house shifted slowly. Relatives who had once asked whether I was doing okay now asked Daniel how the business was recovering. It wasn't accusatory, it was factual. That change had not come from me arguing louder. It came from documentation. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel arrived carrying a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Receipts," he said. "For what?" "For every charge I made." He placed them on the table. Concert tickets, electronics, furniture invoice, airline confirmation. Each receipt was neatly printed. "I should have shown you this at the beginning," he said quietly. "Yes." He sat across from me. "I kept telling myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself. Pride is expensive. I didn't want people knowing I failed," he continued. "The restaurant lost money. The second contract fell through. I didn't know how to tell you. So you used the card instead. I told myself it was temporary. Temporary without consent is debt." He nodded. "And I told people you were overreacting." "You did." "I said you were slowing down." "You did." He looked down at his hands. "I'm ashamed of that." Shame, when acknowledged, becomes humility. When denied, it becomes aggression. "I forgive you," I said. He looked up. "Already?" "Yes." "Then why does this still feel heavy?" "Because forgiveness isn't erasure," I replied. "It's permission to rebuild." He nodded slowly. Over the next few weeks, small things changed. He stopped correcting my financial decisions. He stopped suggesting simplifications. He asked before offering advice. Respect is often visible in tone before it appears in words. Melissa came over one afternoon in early January. "I've been reviewing our own credit card statements," she said. "And we were spending like your card would always be there. That's not how responsibility works." "I know." She folded her hands. "I told people you were being paranoid. I heard. I called each of them. And I told them I was wrong. That mattered more than apology. Narratives need correction publicly, not privately." Emily continued her Sunday visits. One day, she brought her laptop. "I made a spreadsheet," she said proudly. "For what?" "Dad's repayment schedule." She showed me the columns. Original balance, remaining balance, monthly payments, projected completion date. 3 years and 2 months, she said. Unless he increases payments. She grinned. He might. Teenagers respect progress. In February, Daniel surprised me. He transferred $2,500. "Tax refund," he said. "Applied to principal." I nodded. Momentum builds quietly. One evening in March, Daniel asked if we could review my investment portfolio together. Not to question it, to understand it. I realized something, he said while studying the statements. What? You've been consistent for decades. I've been reactive for months. Consistency compounds. Reaction escalates. He looked at me carefully. I thought adding my name to your credit card meant shared access. It meant shared responsibility. He absorbed that. By spring, the outstanding amount had dropped below $8,000. The weight in the room felt lighter. Not gone. Lighter. At a family gathering in April, someone joked about borrowing Dad's card. Daniel responded before I could. That's not funny. The room fell quiet. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. That was humility. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just corrected behavior. Later that evening, he approached me privately. I used to think money was the issue, he said. It was. It was control. Yes. And fear. Yes. I was afraid of failing. And afraid of asking. He nodded. I didn't want to look small. You looked smaller trying to hide it. He smiled faintly. That's accurate. The repayment finished in late May. He transferred the final $1,187.39 and sent the screenshot. Final payment. No fanfare. No speech. Just closure. I updated my ledger and closed the file. Financially, the matter was resolved. Emotionally, resolution takes longer. One afternoon, I slipped slightly while stepping off the curb near the grocery store. Nothing serious, just a momentary imbalance. Daniel was there within 10 minutes after I called. He didn't mention finances. He didn't suggest oversight. He asked if I needed ice. That's the difference between control and care. Care doesn't require access. It requires presence. In June, I met with Elaine, my attorney. I'd like to update my estate plan, I said. Daniel sat beside me. I'm naming Emily as co-successor trustee, alongside a neutral fiduciary. Daniel looked surprised. You don't trust me? He asked softly. I trust who you're becoming, I replied, but structure protects everyone. He considered that. That's fair. Fairness feels different than punishment. It feels stable. He signed acknowledgement without argument. That told me more than any apology. By summer's end, something subtle had shifted completely. Daniel no longer saw my finances as backup. He saw them as mine. Melissa no longer framed my caution as paranoia. She framed it as discipline. Emily continued asking direct questions. And I continued answering them. If you're listening right now, and you've ever felt your generosity being redefined as obligation, pause for a moment. Boundaries aren't betrayal. They are clarity. If this story resonates, take a second to like and subscribe. These conversations matter because they happen quietly, and sometimes the only evidence is a statement no one wants to read. Now let me tell you what I learned. The credit card was never the real issue. Access was. Access granted casually becomes expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement. Entitlement becomes narrative. And narrative, if unchecked, can make the wrong person look unstable. But paper doesn't lie. Statements don't whisper. They list. And when you let them speak, emotion has to step aside. Daniel once said, it was just for emergencies. He wasn't wrong. It was an emergency. Just not the kind he meant. It was an emergency of character. And character, unlike credit balances, cannot be restored with a single payment. It requires consistency. It requires humility. And it requires the willingness to let documentation correct you. Not loudly, not publicly, but clearly. That's what changed our family. Not anger, not confrontation, but numbers. And a teenager who refused to accept rounding as truth. The final payment didn't feel dramatic. Daniel transferred $1,187.39 on a Thursday afternoon in late May. The notification appeared on my phone while I was watering the tomato plants in the backyard. Final repayment, the memo read. No exclamation point. No speech. Just closure. I walked back inside, dried my hands, and updated the ledger I'd kept since the first charge appeared. $14,612.39, fully repaid. Numbers balanced again. But relationships don't balance as neatly as spreadsheets. That evening, Daniel came over without being asked. He stood in the doorway holding nothing in his hands this time. No folder, no receipts, no statements. I saw the transfer clear, he said. Yes. He stepped inside slowly. I don't feel relieved, he admitted. I feel exposed. Exposure isn't punishment, I replied. It's correction. He nodded. I keep thinking about that first charge, he said. The laptop, I told myself it was harmless. Small decisions shape larger ones. I didn't see it happening. You didn't want to. Silence settled between us, not tense, just honest. I told people you were overreacting, he continued. I said you were obsessed with money. I heard. You were. No. I was embarrassed, he said again, as if saying it enough times would make it less true. Embarrassment isn't fatal, I said quietly. Dishonesty can be. He absorbed that. Over the next few weeks, our conversations changed. They were no longer defensive. They were reflective. He asked about my budgeting system. I showed him how I categorize fixed expenses separately from discretionary spending. He asked why I track credit utilization ratios even though I pay balances in full. I explained how habits reinforce discipline. You've always been like this, he said one afternoon, flipping through my binder of archived statements. Yes. And I thought it was rigidity. It's structure. He leaned back in his chair. I confused stability with control. That's common. Melissa began visiting alone more often. One afternoon, she brought a stack of their own credit card statements. Can you look at these? She asked. I did. Dining out 3 times a week, subscriptions unused, impulse purchases. You're spending emotionally, I said. She nodded. We didn't realize how much. Spending without review becomes habit. Habit becomes entitlement. I see that now. She hesitated. I told Emily you were paranoid. I know. She corrected me. She's good at that. Melissa smiled faintly. I don't want her learning that from us. Then don't model it. By midsummer, something else shifted. Daniel stopped referring to my finances as something that might eventually be ours. He began referring to them as mine. Language reveals mindset. At a family cookout in July, a cousin joked, "Better not let Daniel near the credit card." Daniel didn't laugh. That wasn't funny, he said calmly. The room quieted. He didn't look at me for approval. He didn't seek validation. He simply corrected it. That was humility. Not loud. Not rehearsed. Just present. In August, I made another decision. I invited Daniel to accompany me to the bank. Sandra greeted us both. "Tom," she said warmly, then nodded at Daniel. "Good to see you." We sat in her office together. "I'd like to add a note to my file," I said. "What kind of note?" she asked. "That any future access, changes, require in-person confirmation from me." "Of course." She typed the instruction into my account profile. Daniel watched quietly. "I should have respected that from the start," he said. Sandra looked at him steadily. "Authority is not inheritance," she replied. He nodded. On the drive home, he spoke without defensiveness. "I kept thinking family meant shared access," he said. "Family means shared responsibility," I corrected. He exhaled slowly. "That's different." "Yes." As autumn approached, life settled into something steady again. Emily started her junior year of high school. She came by on Sundays to study at my dining table. One afternoon, she looked up from her laptop. "Grandpa." "Yes." "Are you glad you added Dad to the card?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I said. She looked surprised. "Why?" "Because it revealed something early." "Like what?" "That access without boundaries creates misunderstanding. And now there are boundaries." She smiled. "I'm putting that in my economics paper." "Quote it correctly." She grinned. In October, Daniel and Melissa hosted dinner at their house for the first time in months. When I arrived, Daniel handed me a printed copy of their new household budget. "Just showing you," he said, not asking. I reviewed it briefly. Reduced dining expenses, consolidated subscriptions, emergency fund line item. "You're building discipline," I said. "Slowly. That's the only way." During dinner, someone mentioned retirement planning. Daniel glanced at me before answering. "Dad taught me something important this year," he said. "If you don't track it, you don't control it." It wasn't praise. It was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement rebuilds what accusation damages. Later that evening, as I stood on their porch preparing to leave, Daniel stopped me. "I'm still ashamed," he said quietly. "Shame fades when behavior changes," I replied. "I don't want you ever thinking I see you as a resource." "I don't." He looked surprised. "You do." "No," I said. "I see a man who made a mistake and corrected it." He exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. "Thank you." In November, I met again with Elaine to finalize my estate update. Emily remained co-successor trustee with a neutral fiduciary. Daniel remained a beneficiary. Structure without distrust. Clarity without punishment. Elaine looked at me carefully. "You handled this well," she said. I handled it calmly. Many wouldn't. Anger would have felt satisfying in the moment. But documentation is stronger than volume. As winter approached, I found myself thinking less about the charges and more about the lesson. It was just for emergencies, Dad. Daniel had meant financial emergencies. But the real emergency had been relational. The emergency was trust misused. The emergency was authority misunderstood. The emergency was narrative weaponized. And the solution had not been confrontation. It had been statements. If you're listening right now and someone tells you they're protecting your money, ask one question. From whom? If the answer is vague, look at the paper. Numbers don't lie. They don't whisper. They don't exaggerate. They list. And when they list enough entries, patterns appear. Patterns correct narratives. And corrected narratives restore dignity. By the time the year ended, the credit card account looked exactly like it had before. Routine charges, predictable payments, zero balance carried forward. The difference wasn't visible in the statement. It was visible in the conversation. Daniel no longer assumed access. Melissa no longer minimized boundaries. Emily continued asking precise questions. And I continued answering them. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not the absence of consequence. It is the presence of correction. Trust is not automatic. It is earned through consistency. And authority, once misused, must be rebuilt slowly, even inside a family, especially inside a family. If this story reminded you of something in your own life, remember this. Generosity does not equal obligation. Access does not equal ownership. And love does not require surrendering your boundaries. Sometimes the strongest response isn't anger. It's documentation and the quiet confidence to let the statements speak for you.